Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Um, 19 days ago, on October 6th, the first day of the largest strike in Alberta's history, I stood here and said that this was not a day that any of us wanted. And that remains true today. What is happening right now is not what teachers wanted, not what parents wanted, and certainly not what students deserve. When teachers made the difficult decision to strike, it was never out of choice, it was out of necessity. The issues that drove us here were not sudden nor small. They were not new, nor did they develop in just recent year. They're the result of years of chronic underfunding, growing class sizes, and increasing classroom complexity that have made it harder and harder for teachers to give every child the attention they deserve. Today, however, the government's decision to unilaterally end this legal labor action is neither necessary nor justified. It is undemocratic and deeply disrespectful to teachers, to students, and to the collective bargaining process itself. By legislating teachers back to work, the government has chosen to silence tens of thousands of voices, the same voices that they heard and saw outside the legislature just yesterday. Instead of addressing what is the real crisis in education, they are choosing to silence it. And let me be clear, teachers have bargained in good faith. We have brought forward thoughtful, practical solutions to improving learning conditions, including meaningful discussions around class size and classroom complexities, student-teacher ratios, the very factors that shape every child's daily experience in school. By choosing to table back-to-work legislation, the government is choosing to ignore these issues raised by teachers and kicking any kind of negotiated settlement down the road. Public education in Alberta is in a crisis. The system needs to be fixed. We are in a situation that cannot be ignored any longer. And we are running the risk of returning to the same broken system that drove us to strike in the first place, one where too many students, too few supports, and too little respect make it harder for teachers to teach and for students to learn. And that is why class size and student-teacher ratios must be part of the solution going forward. The evidence is overwhelming. Decades of international research, including the association's latest publication on class size evidence from around the world, show that smaller class sizes improve learning outcomes, strengthen teacher-student relationships, and deliver the biggest gains for our most vulnerable students. From Canada to the UK to countries across the globe, the findings are consistent. Class size matters. Teachers have spoken up, Albertans have spoken up, but instead of listening, the government has chosen not to negotiate at the bargaining table, but to shut the conversation down. To the 50,000 plus teachers who stood together for students and for public education, thank you. Your courage has inspired this province. To the tens of thousands of Albertans who have stood with us, thank you for your support, your messages, your horns, and your hearts. This government may plan to legislate a return to work, but they cannot force us to stop caring. They cannot force us to stop advocating. And we will continue to stand strong together with those who lead this province so that those who lead this province will finally learn to listen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Now we will go to questions. To ask a question, please raise your virtual hand. We will do one question and a follow until we get through all the questions. And if there's time at the end, we'll come back to previous questioners. First person is Janet French. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hey there. I understand from talking to some labor experts that the government can decide what mechanism to try and resolve the dispute after this back to work order, and that they can also impose conditions or limits on what you can and cannot bargain, arbitrate, mediate on. What will happen? What will you do if the government says we will not address class size or pupil-teacher ratio at whatever mechanism that is?
Well, I mean, this is one of the fundamental issues and why you see teachers out on strike right now and why you see such good support from parents in the community, because we all recognize the need to talk about student-teacher ratios. There are two jurisdictions in Canada that do not have this within negotiated settlements, and it's time now to have this conversation in Alberta. They came to us last week with an enhanced mediation that did not include a conversation around student-teacher ratios and class size complexities, and Council turned that down because we know that our members need to see that in terms of the conversation. Now, if government wants to further go ahead with legislation that shuts this conversation down, these are decisions that Provincial Executive Council, which is the governing body of the association, will make determinations on, but we need to see what Bill 2 actually has to say in terms of its details first.
Okay, and to follow up, has the association spoken to legal counsel yet about your options for resisting the legislation or any elements of it? And if so, what options are you considering?
Well, the options again will be determined by Provincial Executive Council once we've seen the actual details of the bill. Throughout the entire process, any bargaining process, the association always refers to legal counsel to make sure that we are meeting, labor board guidelines, that we're following the law that's laid out in the legislation that governs bargaining. So we are constantly in conversation with our lawyers and our team with that, and have been throughout this process as well.
Okay, next question is with Stephen Sandor, Edmonton Journal.
Thanks for doing this, Jason. As you've seen, and as we've heard over the last day or so, many unions are now being very vocal about their concern about this notwithstanding clause or possibility of its use, and about back to work legislation, how could it affect their negotiations, and possibly being a province-wide wider labor action next week. What conversations have you had with other unions, and what is the support going forward?
Well, I meet regularly with the leaders of other unions in Alberta and have many conversations with leaders in unions across Canada throughout the duration of this strike. I can't presuppose what other unions would do in terms of any kind of legislation that we see come down that affects teachers that could ultimately affect them as well. We see the use of the notwithstanding clause that has a direct impact on negotiations for every union across this province. It has an impact on Albertans that we are going to suddenly start using clauses within legislation that restrict our rights. And that should be a concern for Albertans beyond the scope of the teacher strike and the legislated settlement that could be coming. We need to make sure that we're watching this very carefully and be responsive to it as necessary.
And my understanding is, and we were told by a couple of union leaders yesterday, that there's a meeting today amongst union leaders to sort of discuss options about this. Has that meeting happened yet, or is that coming later today?
That meeting has not happened yet, and so I will just have to wait until see what happens after that.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Next question goes to Jack Farrell.
Hey, Jack Farrell with the Canadian Press. Just based on your tone, President Schilling, and kind of what you're saying, I'm assuming it's fair to assume that there's, no meetings going to happen with TIBA today, tomorrow, Sunday. Like, you guys are pretty resigned that, we're just going to come to Monday and then we're going to have legislation, and that's that. Like, you don't seem very confident that there's going to be any meetings before then.
Well, I'm frustrated by this entire process, and so are our colleagues across this province, teachers across the province, parents, students. Everybody's frustrated by the fact that government has very clearly stated that they don't want to talk about student-teacher ratios. They don't want to talk about the things that have put us in this situation to begin with. They don't want to talk about the chronic underfunding that we see within the system, the fact that students are falling through the cracks. They don't want to talk about that. We've been more than willing to sit down and negotiate through this entire process. I said so last week. But there's two hands on the wheel when it comes to bargaining. There's two groups of people at the table. You need to be able to come to the table and have those conversations. And I find it silly and nonsensical or a lot of nonsense, sorry, is the fact that people are looking for formal invitations. We are more than open to sit down and have these conversations. Government is well aware of that. We can do that at any point in time. A negotiated settlement would be ideal. That is what we would like to ultimately see. But government has made it very clear that they are looking to do back to school legislation on Monday.
So you won't be initiating any talks over the weekend. You're waiting for them to come to you.
When waiting to have a conversation, it takes both sides. We have been indicating all along that we are willing to sit down and negotiate at any given time. Our Central Table Bargaining Committee is ready and willing. And I also often hear that the other side is like, well, we're often and ready and willing to do that. But there's been no overtures on the part of government, except for a letter last week that said we would like to go into enhanced mediation, but only under their rules. And so that's not going to work for the association and its members.
Okay, next question goes to CTV News Edmonton.
Hey, good afternoon, Jason. Brendan Purdy, CTV Edmonton. You say probably no conversations this weekend until after Monday. How do you feel the potential back to school legislation will affect future bargaining?
Well, we'll have to see what the legislation says in terms of the language and what its direction is and where it goes. But we know that bargaining is based on relationships and it's based on negotiations. And teachers have felt deeply disrespected by government, definitely through the strike with ads that are targeted to smear its leadership and to try to divide teachers from the public. They feel deeply disrespected by that, and by decisions that were made prior to this that led to these decisions. The fact that we are so chronically underfunded in this system that's driving teachers away, it will damage the relationship moving forward, but we will work towards repairing that relationship as well, because we realize we need to bargain with the same folks down the road in just a couple of years. And so we'll have to work hard to make sure that we can build a relationship that is going to work so that we can get things put into place, measures, collective agreements that are going to serve teachers, students, and their parents so that we don't get stuck in this cycle that we seem to be stuck in right now.
Now, Jason, if the back to work legislation is introduced, there are really three main options. You can follow the order, there's work to rule, or defying the order. Is there potential that the ATA would advise teachers to defy a back to work order?
Well, again, this is a decision that Provincial Executive Council will look at once we see the back to work order, once we see the legislation. We will sit down, we will analyze the contents of it, and then we will make decisions about our next steps at that point.
Okay, next question goes to CBC National. Sam Sampson.
Hello. Thanks for taking our questions. On that note, then, what will the ATA do should teachers kind of take it into their own hands and decide not to go back to class? We heard from a lot of frustrated educators yesterday who suggested they might do as such.
Again, we need to have those conversations once we see the legislation. And I don't mean to repeat myself in terms of response to these questions, but that is the answer is we don't know the contents of the bill. It is not made public yet. We don't have a full understanding of what the details will be, what it might include, what it might not include. And we'll have to handle that situation as we move forward once we have more information. Right now, we can speculate all we want, but at this moment, we need to make sure that we know the facts. The association doesn't engage in a lot of speculation around this publicly, and we are not going to start doing that now, but we need to see the facts of what the document says so that we have a better understanding about what our next steps are.
And I guess the Premier's comments just about separate classrooms for students with disabilities, a promise to fund specific numbers more of teachers and EAs, like how come that's not an acceptable solution at this point?
Well, I would say that hiring teachers and EAs is the responsibility of government anyways. They should be doing this all along. We have the highest student per pupil ratio in all of Canada. And that is because government has not been hiring teachers to keep pace with the number of students that have been coming into this province. They have not been hiring educational assistants, in the same regard. That is, in fact, their job. They should be doing that. And to look at segregated classrooms in terms of inclusion, they have a policy of inclusion. And inclusion works when students are supported. I hear a lot from my colleagues about the struggles that they have working with students that do not have the supports that they need in classrooms. I have never heard one of my colleagues say they wanted those students to be in a separate classroom. They want those students in those classrooms. We want to work with them. We want to engage with them so that they also can engage with their peers. It is better for them. But inclusion in Alberta is not funded the way that it needs to be. They put students into classrooms without support, and they are essentially abandoning them. And that has been the government's chronic underfunding of the system. They carry that. That is their shameful fact. It has nothing to do with teachers. They're doing their very best to make sure that this works. So now to speculate all of a sudden that we're going to make a change, well, I think that is a conversation that they need to engage with the profession with, as well as school boards and parents, because parents have a very loud voice in this conversation as well.
And just briefly, because I got a repetitive answer first, which is no one's fault really, but how likely is work to rule? No sports, no extracurriculars, no clubs. Students will really want to know the answer to this one.
Well, work to rule is considered strike action. And if we're legislated back to work, that ends the strike. And technically, right now, we're locked out. So we're locked out by the government, by TIBA. If they end that, they end any kind of legal job action that teachers can embark on, and that includes work to rule.
Okay, next question goes to Devin with Post Media.
Hi, Jason. Just wondering what your response is to Danielle Smith's claims that the strike is causing irreparable harm to kids.
Well, I understand the premier's stance on that because that's her opinion, and she's welcome to that. I guess I would comment back that the system is in chronic underfunding, that students are experiencing irreparable harm because this government cannot seem to fund students in a way that is appropriate. We have students falling through the cracks. We have students whose needs are not met every day. When we talk about irreparable harm, look at the choices that this government has made in terms of funding. And there is all sorts of problems and issues and concerns out there that government are choosing to ignore. And throughout this entire strike, we've heard from teachers, we've heard from parents, we've heard from students who say they are not getting their needs met at school. And yet government has chosen to ignore those voices and only listen to the voices that fit their narrative.
Thank you, Jason. I don't have a follow-up.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Next question is Catherine with All Alberta.
Hi. So I was wondering what, if any, conversations the government has had with you about the expectation for the timing to return to work. I know the minister said that those details still have to be worked out, but presuming that they pass this back to work legislation, what's the expectation for the timelines?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that because I've not been privy to the contents of Bill 2. So I don't know what kind of timelines government are looking at. I know through the notice of motion that was released, I believe, yesterday around the procedure through the legislature that they're looking to evoke closure around debate and to move this bill as quickly as possible through the House. In terms of what the actual return to date, I don't know the details of that. And it sounds like through your inquiries with the government that they seem to be a little bit unsure about that as well.
And on, I guess, another note, there was that very large rally outside the legislature yesterday, and I wondered what went through your head when you saw that many teachers and parents and students out in front of the legislature.
Yes, and first of all, I want to start with the thanks to the locals here in Edmonton Public and Edmonton Catholic, Heather Quinn and Amber Nicholson, who spearheaded that rally on behalf of our colleagues across this province. I stood in front of tens of thousands of Albertans yesterday who care about public education, who showed up on the same day that the legislature was starting with their throne speech so that their voices could be heard by government. They stood out there and shared stories about underfunding, about the lack of resources, about the need to be heard by government to improve the funding for public education in this province. Teachers stood out there and said, we need help. We need things in our classrooms to make life better for our students. And because they feel ignored by government. That is why you were seeing tens of thousands of Albertans gathering across this province. We had a huge gathering yesterday here in Edmonton, but they have been gathering in Fort McMurray, in Grand Prairie, in High Level, in Fort Macleod, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Red Deer. You name the town across this province, teachers and supporters and parents are gathering to have the government listen to what they need to see happen in classrooms. And I am frustrated beyond all capacity that the government is choosing to ignore them. And that is undemocratic, in my opinion, and it is a fault of this government to not listen to those folks.
The next question goes to Aaron Souza with the Canadian Press.
Hi, Jason. Thanks so much for taking our questions. Forgive me if I sound like a broken record. I just want to make sure that we're perfectly clear here. I know you mentioned that it takes two to tango, really. But can you say specifically if the union will be speaking to government about restarting talks this weekend?
We have no formal approach or any date set in terms of conversations this weekend, but are open to having those conversations.
Awesome. And my follow-up is, I know you mentioned that you still need to see this back to work legislation once it's tabled on Monday, but will the ATA, if it passes, challenge the back to work order? Is this something that's been on the table? Like I mentioned, I know you have to speak with legal and see the bill in the first place, but has that been a consideration?
Again, we'll have to see what the bill says, and I appreciate your patience with the repetitive nature of that response. We'll have to look at it. Whether or not we do a legal challenge, again, that'll be determining on the details. But I'll tell you, the association stands up for its members. We have every day, and we will every day moving forward. And so we will look and see what it has to say, and then we'll move forward from there.
Okay, that concludes our question queue. Are there any other questions that anyone wants to bring up? The repeat offenders are welcome at this point. I see Bob Covey from Jasper. Go ahead. Unmute yourself and ask a question, Bob.
Thanks so much, Corey, and thanks, Jason. My question is that the ATA knew this contract renewal was approaching for a long time and is aware that a provincial election is a long ways away, putting the government in a relatively strong bargaining position, I would argue. So my question is, why didn't the ATA start putting these working conditions in front of Albertans a long time ago? Why are we at this sort of breaking point now? Thanks.
Well, I would argue, Bob, that we've been talking about our classroom conditions for a while now. The bargaining process started a year ago. We start with our members in terms of doing initial proposal, doing surveys, focus groups to make sure that what we heard in the survey is what teachers really want. But we don't bargain in public. And that has been a little bit of something that we've seen government more willing to do in the last several weeks. And so these conversations have been happening with government. They're well aware of what these concerns are, what the pressure points are. You've seen ad campaigns by the association highlighting these concerns over the last several years, going back to Stop the Cuts many years ago when I first started my role here on Provincial Executive Council. The fact that we were seeing flat budgets, or budgets that had no increase to the operational part, or we've seen cuts to budgets. This is, like I said earlier, not something that is new. This is a chronic underfunding of a system and a lot of issues and challenges that have been long-standing. And teachers have finally, at this point, through this process, have said enough is enough. We can't keep going forward without the needs that without the resources that we need to meet our students' needs.
All right, point taken. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you for that question. Janet French is next. Go ahead.
Hi again. So if we were talking about labor expert this morning, and who postulated that in a back to work legislation scenario, teachers could be told to go back within like 36 or 48 hours, like pretty fast turnaround upon proclamation of the bill. How ready our teachers are for that kind of fast turnaround to show up at work?
Yeah, it's a great question. We'll have to see what the time frame is on that, and then look at that. But teachers are professionals. They'll be able to engage with their classrooms, and I know that they miss their students right now. I have heard some speculation from boards based on potentially what could happen, that maybe that first day back might be an operational day so that teachers and the rest of schools, because it's not just teachers who need to be ready. We also have to ensure that educational assistants, bus drivers, everybody else who's working within the system is ready to go. So boards will have to be able to be the ones who handle that essentially, but we'll also have to see exactly what this legislation might say in terms of timelines.
Right. And could you just speak to some of the challenges? Because, school's not like a light switch. You can't just switch it on and off instantaneously. What kinds of things would teachers need to do to get ready to welcome kids back after that, 3 or more week
Well, you'd have
stop?
to, yeah, it's like returning from other breaks that we might have, like a summer break or that. You have to make sure that your classroom's ready. You have to make sure that everything is in place in terms of lesson planning, maybe materials that you need to engage with lesson plannings. All of that needs to be done ahead of time. Teachers need to be able to have all the resources set aside for what their students are going to be doing, and this takes time. And this is actually one of the things that teachers keep talking about, is a lot of this stuff is done after hours, late into the evening of getting ready. And so we need to make sure that teachers are ready to welcome students back. They will look forward to it. And we know that we will have to make sure that students feel that they're also in a safe, caring environment, which teachers work very, very hard to do. And there'll be lots of little specific things like that in order to get ready for school.
Thank you for that question. Next question is Catherine, again with All Alberta.
Yeah, thanks for taking another round. I'm wondering, so obviously nobody's seen the details of Bill 2 yet, but what are the sort of things that you'll be looking for? Are you going to be seeing whether it's they are using the notwithstanding clause, or whether they are going to use some other mechanism? What are the sort of things that you will be looking for in that legislation?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that we'll be looking pretty much for everything. What is the angle that government is taking here? What are they going to? They've got different options that they can choose with this. And of course, we'll have to analyze those when we move forward. But I'll be curious to see if government's actually listened to the voices of Albertans and teachers and parents and students. Have they listened to the fact that we are in a system that is chronically underfunded and essentially broken? Have they listened to the fact that parents want better for their kids who are going to schools? Have they listened to kids who have said they want better for when they go to school, for their own learning, and for their teachers who they adore? Have they listened? That is really one of the key things that I'm going to be looking for on Monday.
All right. And in terms of you had mentioned breaks, and that tweaked my memory that I think at least at Edmonton Public, I know there's a fall break planned in a couple weeks. Will will those breaks still go ahead? Have you heard any indication of the school calendar changing to accommodate the learning loss, such as potentially asking teachers to work into the summer, or have you heard any of that type of talk?
Yeah, those are really decisions that are made by school boards, not necessarily by teachers in the association, but any kind of decisions around that. I would expect that there would be conversations with teachers at the local level, and with our teacher employment member service staff here at the association. If boards are looking to make any kind of alterations to school calendars, they would also, I would encourage them to be speaking to parents, because parents have expectations and plans with that as well. But I know that boards do have some flexibility with that, and I would hope that they would engage with the profession around any kind of conversations of what they might be planning to do.
Okay, thank you for that question. We have the Lethbridge Herald, Alejandra.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, go ahead, please.
Hi. So one question that I have is obviously the main concern is, overcrowding classrooms and stuff like that. But at this point, like the immediate answer to that, what would you accept if in reality a physical answer to that would be more infrastructure that we don't have at the moment? So what would take for you to be okay with a response from the government that could be done right away?
Well, I know that there's an infrastructure problem here, and I've talked to my colleagues who might say, our school's full, and we have many schools that are over capacity in this province because government has failed to keep up with that building of schools across the province. But more individuals in schools to help teachers teach students or to work with students is a place to start. You might have a class that you could have two teachers in there. They could be doing a co-teaching situation. You could have individuals in schools who are working with students in sort of a one-to-one basis or small pull-out sections. Schools are creative. Teachers are creative, they're resilient. School leaders and administrators are creative as well. You give them the resources, you give them the ability to have access to personnel, to wraparound services, occupational therapists, speech pathologists, programming to help students with special needs, programming to help students who are learning English as an additional language. You get those supports and those people in those buildings to work with them, they will find a way to use those resources to help students. But right now, we don't have that.
All right. Well, thank you. I don't have a follow-up after that.
Thank you.
Okay, we are getting towards the end of this, but we do have another question from Aaron Souza, Canadian Press. So let's go ahead. Aaron, ask your question and we'll do a follow, and then if you have, and we'll wrap it up after that.
Hi, yeah, I'll do this question quickly. I'm just wondering, the teachers have been on strike since October 6th, and I'm sure the internet's a very powerful tool, Jason, and I'm sure that you've received quite a few emails, seen posts on social media. I'm wondering if in your eyes there's a misconception that people have sort of latched onto in the strike that you think has been the sort of idea that's been misconstrued by the public, that you feel the need to clear up.
I'm not sure, Aaron, if you could give me maybe some specifics in terms of what you might be talking about. I mean, I see the spectrum of things on the internet as you've indicated there, and some of the things there are frustrating. For instance, maybe the premier saying that, we have 700,000 students divided by X amount of teachers. We should have a class size of 21. Well, that's just simply not the case. And that's not the way that population density works. It's not the way that the distribution of students within our schools work. And so when we see things like that, it's misleading in my mind to the public to say, well, we should have class sizes of 21. Then why do my colleagues just down the road from where I am working right now have a class size in the 40s? If that's the math that's working in that way. I mean, I see an oversimplification of some of the issues within the press and within social media and said by members of our MLAs of the situation that we have. I mean, another one that I would note is sorry, the math. Oh, sorry, it just fell out of my head, Aaron, of what my other example was. But maybe you'll come back to me. But if you have something specific you'd like me to address, I'm more than happy to do a little myth busting.
No worries at all. Thank you for understanding my gobbledygook. I don't have a follow-up.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your attendance today and for your questions. We really appreciate your engagement with this. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.